Good morning, everyone. Pete Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. Welcome to another edition of Ranking the Albums. As promised this morning, we've got the studio albums of Savatage. Florida's very own Savatage, one of the most underrated heavy metal bands of all time, in my opinion. A band that I don't think ever put out a dud of an album. Yeah, there's a couple that maybe aren't as strong as some of the rest of the catalog, but top to bottom, just a band that personified heavy metal. You know, you can talk about your thrash bands and your death metal bands and your proto metal bands and your commercial metal bands, your glam metal bands, your grindcore metal bands, your doom bands, all that stuff, power metal, progressive metal. Savatage were always just a heavy metal band. Yeah, sure, they dabbled a little bit of power metal style stuff, and they also later in their career did some very progressive things, but just, you know, most of their catalog is just pure American heavy metal, and great, I might add, with fantastic vocals, kick-ass guitar work, grand, majestic arrangements, and plenty of heft to their songs. So this was kind of hard for me because I've had a love affair with this band for most of my adult life, and I dig most of these albums pretty damn equally. But you know what? When you're doing an exercise like this, you kind of have to stop and reflect and put them in some kind of order. The one thing I was like pretty surprised at when I was kind of, you know, saying to myself, all right, I'm going to do this video at the end of the week, is that I realized I didn't have one of their studio albums on CD. I had it on LP back in the day. That's Fight for the Rock. For whatever reason, I never got it on CD. I don't know why. Probably because it's my least favorite Savatage album. But I haven't heard it in a long time, so I actually went and listened to it. Listened to the whole album on YouTube, and it's actually a lot stronger than I thought it was. There are some great songs on it, and then there's some not so great stuff and a couple covers. So I'm going to go from my least favorite to my favorite, and that is actually going to be my least favorite. All right, it's going to be at the bottom of the ladder, but on reflecting, I don't think it's nearly as bad as I remember it back when I was a teenager, early 20-something, back in the late 80s. I will say it has a handful of really strong tracks. I think the title track, Fight for the Rock, is very, very good. I think The Edge of Midnight is kick-ass, as is Hide. I think Lady in Disguise is kind of a cool, kind of like majestic power rocker, kind of like what we would see from the band in the 90s, and certainly kind of like the TSO kind of big bombast type of thing. She's Only Rock and Roll, I think, is a pretty kick-ass song. They do a killer cover of Wishing Well by Free. Seems like everybody was doing covers of that song back in the day, right? You had Gary Moore, you had Blackfoot, right? I think theirs is really good. They do Day After Day, cover of Badfinger's classic. Was that really needed on here? I don't know. Crying for Love, that's actually a pretty good song. All right. Out in the Streets, all right, that's from their earlier album. That's actually, I think, a really good kind of commercial number for the band. All right, so I don't think it's a very successful album, but I think it has aged better than kind of what initially we thought back in the day. I know you can go online and read all sorts of stuff from the band talking about how that was a disaster and they hate that album, and the record company, had them make the album more commercial and yada, yada, yada. But I think, when you listen back on it, it's really not that bad. It's really not that bad. There's some kick-ass songs on that. Maybe as a whole, 100%, it's not that great, but I definitely think it has its merits. But it's going to be at the bottom of my list today. Again, don't get too hung up on where these albums are. There's going to be plenty of people going to be like, oh, I can't believe you put that album so low. I disagree. That's fine. All right? I'm just telling you right now that I like all these albums. I really do. So it's hard to kind of rank them, right? Because you got to go with the ones that mean the most to you. And I'm sure there's going to be some of these albums that mean more to other people than they do me. And that's totally fine. It's the way it should be, right? It's the power of music. It affects all of us differently. So I'm going to go next in line. I'm going to go with Poets and Madmen, which is the last studio album that the band did. And again, I really enjoy this album. I think for me, this album probably suffers a little bit from, it starts off really, really strong, and then towards the back end, it kind of loses a little bit. But I think, man, the first half has some killer songs. Commissar, There in the Shadows, Stay With Me a While, Drive, Morphine Child, some really strong songs in the first half of the CD. And this is, basically Chris Caffrey's one album with the band where it's just him as the solo guitar player. And I think for me, this album is almost kind of an extension of the Dr. Butcher CD, which, I was going to save this for last, but since I mention it right now, I will show it here. This is Dr. Butcher. This is basically John Oliva on vocals and keyboards and Chris Caffrey on guitar and a couple other dudes. This was kind of, I think, at a time where those two guys really wanted to do another Savatage record, and for various reasons they really couldn't, so they did this kind of side project. And I know they always wanted to, Chris, I know Chris long time, and Chris has always told me he really wanted to do another Dr. Butcher record, and it just kind of never happened. But, we did get that other Savatage album. So, again, I like Poets and Madmen, so just because it's second to last doesn't mean I don't dig it, because I do. It's a good album. All right, next up, I probably would have ranked, if you would have asked me this question, and if I would have done this exercise like 20 years ago, I would have ranked this pretty low to the bottom. But I actually think this album has aged very well, and I'm talking about Handful of Rain. So, of course, this is the album that the band did after the tragic passing of guitar player Chris Oliva. In comes Alex Skolnick, of course, from Testament. All right. You know what? I gave this album a lot of shit back in the day, and I think that it is one of those albums that just gets better as time goes on. Alex Skolnick's guitar playing is fabulous on here. He's just a great player. I was not ready to move on from the Chris Oliva years. In addition, you've got Zach Stevens. I started listening to this band with John Oliva singing all the songs, being the singer. So I still was not accepting Zach as a full-time vocalist in the band yet, even though they did another album with him prior to this. But you listen to this album now, it's actually really, really good. There's some great songs in there. Castles Burning is a fabulous song. All right, this is just grand, majestic U.S. heavy metal. Just absolutely love it. Handful of Rain. All right, Taunting Cobras, pretty snarling kickoff track on here. What else? The instrumental Visions is great. Symmetry, fantastic song. Just a lot of really, really great tunes on here. Is it like top shelf Savatage? No, but I think my excitement here is more for the fact that that this album I have appreciated much, much more than I would have a while ago, a decade or two ago. So, Handful of Rain. All right, next up, I'm gonna include this in here. This is the Dungeons Are Calling EP. All right, a couple extra tracks added to the CD. It's basically almost CD length as it is anyway. I think this is pretty damn strong. This comes, not long after the debut Sirens. I just think that the title track is killer. A lot of other great tunes on this album, and I think it's pretty damn heavy. The early Savatage stuff, very, very heavy. And I got to include this on here because I've always enjoyed it. I had it on LP back in the day. So, all right, next up I'm going to go with Edge of Thorns. Another album that, again, when it first came out, I was into it, but I wasn't as much into it because I had a hard time with listening to Savatage not being sung by John Oliva. But some great tunes on here. All right, again, aged very well. I think a lot of the Savatage albums age very well. Edge of Thorns is a great anthem for the band. And as the first thing hearing from Zach Stevens, pretty damn good, right? He Carves His Stone. Scraggy's Tomb is kick-ass. Labyrinth. What else? Conversation Piece. Damien. Damien is awesome. Heavy tune. This would be the last album we would hear from Chris Oliva. Amazing player. Another one of those kind of underrated heavy metal guitar players. Just the guy was just incredible. Could shred with the best of them, but play with a ton of feeling. Great player. Very, very much missed. All right, next up, I'm going to go with The Wake of Magellan. Okay, so here you got, a much bigger Savatage band, right? So obviously, Skolnick is left. Here you got Chris Caffrey and Al Pitrelli, okay? You've got John Oliva kind of hanging out, doing some backing vocals, playing keyboards. You got Zach Stevens, right, and company. But a very strong, very progressive, bombastic album. And I think the seeds of Trans-Siberian Orchestra were basically sown with this album. Okay, a lot of strong tunes on here. Very symphonic, majestic, melodic metal album that I think saw the band really kind of doing more of a kind of like an orchestral thing, progressive thing, and it's just a very enjoyable album that flows really nicely. The playing is superb. Gotta love it, right? All right, next up, another album that's I think I didn't appreciate as much back in the day. Listening to it now, it's pretty damn good. I'm talking about Streets, a rock opera. Okay. So here you have the classic 4 on the front. All right. Some heavy stuff on here. Streets, Jesus Saves. Tonight he grins again. I love Oliva's vocals, man. He's so unique sounding. What else? Can You Hear Me Now? Ghost in the Ruins. Again, those kind of seeds planted for what we would later come to hear with Trans-Siberian Orchestra. Okay, the very kind of Broadway, vaudevillian, theatrical kind of metal, right? Symphonic metal. A lot different than the couple albums that came before this. All right, but fine stuff. Johnny Lee Middleton and Steve Wachholtz and company, all right, on the rhythms. Jeff Plate, I want to mention some of the guys that have been in the band. Dead Winter Dead is going to be number 5 for me. Another album with the team of Caffrey and Petrelli on lead and rhythm guitars. Another very, very fine album. Again, another one of those albums that's the bridge to TSO. Sarajevo, the Overture. This Is the Time, fantastic. This album might be Zach Stevens' crowning achievement in Savatage. All right, Starlight, I Am, the killer song. Doesn't Matter Anyway. Mozart and Madness. Dead Winter Dead, of course, you've got Christmas Eve. Sarajevo makes its appearance within the kind of Savatage camp for the first time here. They would later redo that for Trans-Siberian Orchestra and make it like a global phenomenon, right? But a fantastic album of melodic, symphonic, progressive, orchestral, theatrical metal. All right, very, very important album in the Savatage discography. All right, next up, I'm going to go with the mighty Power of the Night. This is arguably one of their heaviest albums. Well, it's one of them. One of the top, right? Really well produced, super crunchoid riffs coming from Chris Oliva on this album. Some standout tracks. You got Warriors, Power of the Night, Necrophilia, Fountain of Youth, Skull Session. It's this top to bottom, a really, really strong metallic. This is probably their most metallic album. All right, if that makes any sense at all. That's coming in at number 4. Coming in at number 3, my beloved Sirens. I remember buying this in Rock Fantasy in Middletown, New York when it came out. Loved it. Still love it. The title track, Sirens, is one of my all-time favorite songs from this band. God, how heavy and menacing is that, right? Geez, Holocaust, I believe. Great Rage. Kick-ass. Twisted Little Sister, Living for the Night, Scream Murder. This also has the early version of Out in the Streets, which later found its way onto Fight for the Rock. Actually, a very catchy tune. Could have been somewhat of a hit for the band. So that's number 3. Excuse me. Coming in at number 2. An underrated album by them, I think, and always one of my favorites, Gutter Ballet. And just, I think, some great songs on here. Some really, the songwriting of, John Oliva, I think, really starting to kind of peak around this time. In addition to some bludgeoningly heavy songs, you've got some really cool kind of like almost like power ballad. I don't even want to call them power ballads, but this really melodic, symphonic, like kind of classical inspired tracks on here. A lot of keyboards on this album too. Of Rage and War, killer metal track. The title track, Gutter Ballet, is another one of my favorite Savatage songs of all time. And I think absolutely killer lead guitar work from Chris Oliva on this album. All right. You got When the Crowds Are Gone. All right. That's another one of those kind of mellow ballady type tunes. It really, really works. She's in Love, great thumping metal track. Hounds is killer heavy metal track. All right, The Unholy, another raging, speedy metal track. Mentally Yours, bone-crushing heavy. Summer's Rain and the stomping Thorazine shuffle. I think one of the reasons why I love this album so much is it's got a really good variety on it. A little bit of everything, something for everybody on this album. So that comes in at number 2. My favorite album, obviously, I kind of gave it away with the shirt. I was hoping nobody would notice. And one of my favorite albums of all time by anybody is In the Hall of the Mountain King. I listened to this to death back in the day, and I can still put it on today, and it sends the hairs on my arms standing up straight at attention. Every song on here is just absolutely, the last song is called Devastation. Every song on here is devastating for me. 24 Hours Ago, great driving riff rocker. Beyond the Doors of the Dark, killer. Legions, I love Legions. Strange Wings, probably their kind of more hook-laden song on here, but it's a total anthem. Love it. All right, Prelude to Mantis, the instrumental. They got a bunch of really cool instrumentals on their albums too, which needs to be mentioned. The Hall of the Mountain King title track. A top 10 song of all time for me. Okay, just love it. The Price You Pay, White Witch, Last Dawn, and of course Devastation. An incredible vocal performance by John Levon here. Bone-crunching, heavy riffing and fleet-fingered soloing from Chris Oliva, his brother. Cannon-like rhythms. Epic songwriting. This is what you call epic, majestic U.S. heavy metal, folks. In my opinion, it does not get much better than this, one of my favorite heavy metal albums of all time. All right, so there you have it. So, curious to see what you guys think. I know we've gotten a lot of positive responses over the weeks, either people asking about Savatage or when I announced that I was going to do ranking the albums on Savatage. A lot of love out there for Savatage. So, again, let's hear what you think. I want to know, what are your favorite albums by Savatage and why? Stay away from the guy, I can't believe he put number 1 at number 1 or put number 5 at number 5 or he put this, whatever. You're not going to change my opinion on how I rank them, so that's kind of pointless, right? Bring something positive to the channel and let us know which albums are your favorites. All right? I'm still amazed at some of the comments I get from people. It's like, no matter how many times you say this, all they want to do is argue how I've placed things. And they never want to tell anybody how they rank them or why, right? It's just, let's just come to the channel and complain, because I guess there's so many miserable people out there who just, that's all they know how to do. It's like, bring something positive, guys. All right? And again, guys, I'm talking about a select few. Let us know what your favorite Savatage albums are and why. This is a discussion-based program, okay? I am here to instigate discussion amongst all the thousands that watch about certain bands and albums and songs, and get people talking and conversing about why they love these albums and why they don't. All right, but more importantly, for the people who have never heard them, to go out and listen to them. All right, and find the wonder that the rest of us are finding in these albums. Sharing the love of music, spreading the love of music. That is the intention of Sea of Tranquility, is to spread the love of music, to help promote these bands and their music to you guys, the viewers, so that you can go out and discover this stuff, okay, on your own, with a little help from me. All right, so let's recap, okay? Coming in at number 1, The Hall of the Mountain King. Coming in at number 2, Gutter, Ballet. Coming in at number 3, Sirens. Coming in at number 4, Power of the Night. Coming in at number 5, Dead Winter Dead. Coming in at number 6, Streets. Coming in at number 7, In the Wake of Magellan. Coming in at number 8, Edge of Thorns. Coming in at number 9, The Dungeons Are Calling. Coming in at number 10, Handful of Rain. Coming in at number 11, Poets and Madmen. And coming in at number 12, I don't have Fight for the Rock, but I am going to order that probably today because I need it. Got to complete the whole set, right? So there you have it. Savatage, ranking the studio albums. Curious to see what you guys think. Also, visit us on the web at www.seatranquility.org. We're on Facebook. We're on Twitter. Of course, we are on the mighty YouTube all the damn time. So tomorrow, going to be a little silent tomorrow. I'm going to be out doing that comic convention, all right? Me and my buddies Wild Bill and Kirk, as part of Comic Book Geezers, we will be at the Temple Hill Academy School comic and baseball card or comic and card convention. All right, we will have a table there. We will do hopefully some live broadcasts from there and all sorts of fun stuff. So that should be pretty cool. You might see me on Sunday. All right, I gotta figure out my next plan of attack here. All right, so but anyway, if not, we'll see you next week. All right, so take care, guys. Have a good weekend, and we'll see you real soon. Bye bye.